Imagine you have two athletes preparing for a season.
Okay.
And one of them spends 8 weeks doing perfectly calibrated, scientifically measured track sprints. Like the heart rate is monitored, the distances are exact.
Right. A completely controlled laboratory of exertion.
Exactly. But the other athlete spends those exact same 8 weeks just playing chaotic, messy, unpredictable 4-on-4 pickup games on a small field.
Just running around.
Yeah, just playing. Now, if I asked you to predict who ends up with a significantly higher vertical jump at the end of those 2 months, you would probably bet your money on the track athlete.
Right. I mean, most people would. You'd assume the strict precision builds a better machine.
But you would be wrong, because today we're looking at why the chaos of the playground is actually, well, beating the precision of the stopwatch.
It's a completely counterintuitive reality. And it honestly forces us to reevaluate the way we program human physical development. Because when you step into the world of ecological team sports, that highly controlled, linear mindset...
It starts to show some severe limitations.
Exactly.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. We are taking you right into the heart of that complexity today with a study that really challenges the foundational assumptions of athletic conditioning.
It really does.
We are exploring a research article titled, and bear with me, it's a mouthful. It's called Small-Sided Soccer Games Promote Greater Adaptations on Vertical Jump and Change of Direction Deficit and Similar Adaptations in Aerobic Capacity Than High-Intensity Interval Training in Females.
Very catchy title.
Right. Rolls right off the tongue. But this was authored by XiaoYuan, Faming Song, LiuXi Yang, and Qizhu, and it was published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine in 2024.
Yeah, the title is long, but the core investigation tackles a profoundly important gap in sports science. I mean, we're essentially comparing analytical running-based training against ecological game-based training.
And our mission for you today is to explore that exact tension, specifically focusing on a demographic that is, frankly, severely underrepresented in the scientific literature, which is female youth athletes.
Which makes this data so vital.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So to really grasp the weight of this study, you have to understand the historical gold standard for conditioning.
Right.
For decades, high-intensity interval training, or HIIT as everyone calls it, has been the undisputed king of cardiovascular improvement.
Yeah, HIIT is everywhere.
Because it works. From a physiological standpoint, HIIT induces massive adaptations. It radically improves your maximum oxygen uptake. It increases the mitochondrial density in your muscle cells. I mean, it builds a massive aerobic engine.
Basically, you run until your lungs burn, you rest for a precisely timed interval, and you repeat. It's a proven, visible, comforting formula.
Comforting is exactly the right word. But over the last decade or so, small-sided games, which we will just call SSG for short, have emerged as this very loud disruptor in training theory.
Right, because instead of running in a straight line, the athletes are playing 2-on-2 or 4-on-4 mini games.
Exactly. It is inherently ecological, meaning the training environment dictates the movement, not a stopwatch. And look, the scientific community generally agrees that both HIIT and SSG will improve your lung capacity.
The aerobic base.
Right. But where the literature becomes dangerously inconsistent is when we look at explosive neuromuscular movements.
Like jumping.
Jumping, changing direction fast. Which method actually makes an athlete better at those? Especially for young female athletes, the data has just been sparse and highly contradictory.
But knowing those two methods yield mixed results leaves us with a massive design problem. I mean, how do you objectively compare a highly controlled track workout against a chaotic mini game without the data becoming a total mess?
It's incredibly difficult.
It feels like trying to compare, I don't know, a classical pianist playing scales with a metronome to a jazz musician in the middle of a completely improvised jam session.
That's a great analogy.
Right, because the metronome is linear, it's precise, it's completely controlled. But the jazz session is reactive, chaotic, and highly dependent on the environment. So wouldn't the strict precision and mechanical strain of HII naturally yield more reliable, measurable physical improvements than the unpredictable chaos of a minigame?
Well, the methodology is where this study truly shines. The researchers designed a rigorous 8-week randomized controlled trial.
Okay.
They took 48 female youth soccer players. These were athletes under 19 competing at a regional level, and randomly split them into 3 equal groups of 16.
Got it.
There was the SSG group, the HIIT group, and a control group that just maintain their standard everyday infield soccer practice.
So the two experimental groups are taking on 2 extra highly specific sessions a week on top of their normal practice.
Yes. But to your point about the messy data, they had to ensure the actual physical toll on the body was identical between the metronome and the jazz session.
Right, because if the girls playing the 4-on-4 games were just casually kicking the ball around while the HII group was vomiting by the track, the results would be totally meaningless.
Exactly. So they standardized the exertion using the CR10 Borg scale.
Okay, wait. I know the Borg scale is a metric where athletes rate their perceived effort. But how reliable is asking a teenager, like, hey, how hard was that? Compared to just looking at a heart rate monitor?
I know it sounds subjective, but it is a surprisingly highly validated scientific tool when it's used consistently.
Really?
Yeah. An 8.5 out of 10 on the Borg scale isn't just a casual number a kid throws out. It means the athlete is gasping for air, they're unable to hold a conversation, they're tasting copper in the back of their throat.
Oh, wow.
They are nearing their absolute physical limit. And across the 8 weeks, the researchers found the workloads were virtually tied.
No way.
Yeah, the SSG group averaged an exertion score of 8.3, and the HIIT group averaged 8.5.
Okay, so the mechanical strain, the pure survival mode effort, is matched. But the environments they are suffering in are worlds apart.
Completely. The constraints placed on the small-sided games engineered a very specific type of suffering.
How so?
Well, they started with the 2 versus 2 format on a very small pitch, eventually progressing to 4 versus 4. But they deliberately removed all the natural pauses that allow athletes to catch their breath in a real game.
Oh, that's brutal.
There were no offside rules. Coaches were forbidden from providing verbal encouragement, so there was no artificial adrenaline boost.
Wow, just dead silence.
Yep. And most crucially, spare balls were scattered entirely around the perimeter. The very millisecond a ball went out of bounds, another was kicked right into play.
So there's literally no break.
None. The design intentionally forced their heart rates to sit relentlessly between 85 and 90% of their maximum.
A relentless, exhausting jam session where the music never stops.
Perfect way to put it.
Meanwhile, the HIIT group is doing these highly controlled intervals, which I assume were also calibrated to be just as brutal.
They were. The HII intervals were customized to the individual. The researchers tested each athlete's final velocity at the start of the study and built personalized running intervals based on those specific thresholds.
So no one could slack off.
Exactly. Which, this raises an important question. If you lock in that grueling physical exertion, holding the cardiovascular load constant, but you totally change the geometry of the environment from a straight track to a multi-directional battlefield, what actually happens to the muscle fibers?
Right, because since they are experiencing the exact same amount of perceived suffering, any difference in how their bodies adapt must be caused by the modality of the training itself.
Precisely.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because when the researchers tested the athletes after 8 weeks, they broke the physical results down into 3 core attributes. Let's go through them.
Sure. The first attribute tested was aerobic capacity, utilizing the 30-15 intermittent fitness test, or VIFT. This requires 30 seconds of intense running, followed by 15 seconds of recovery, with the required speed progressively increasing until the athlete reaches complete exhaustion.
It's the classic beep test on steroids.
A very apt description. And the results here confirmed the baseline assumption. It was a statistical tie.
Okay.
Both the SSG and HIIT groups vastly outperformed the control group. The experimental groups improved their final running speed by roughly 1.5 kilometers per hour, whereas the control group only saw a negligible 0.4 kilometer per hour bump.
So if your only goal is to build a bigger engine, it literally doesn't matter if you use the metronome or the jam session.
Right.
The lungs adapt to the suffering regardless of the environment.
Exactly.
But soccer isn't just about jogging around a field for 90 minutes.
No, it's not. And the divergence appears the moment we look at explosive neuromuscular power.
The second attribute.
Yes. Jumping performance, quantified by a counter-movement jump. This is a purely vertical leap.
Okay, what happened?
In this metric, the small-sided games demonstrated a significant, undeniable superiority. The SSG group increased their vertical jump by over 3 centimeters compared to the control group.
Okay, let's contextualize that for a second. Because a 3-centimeter increase in just 2 months for a regional-level athlete is staggering.
It's massive.
I mean, that is the literal difference between easily clearing a defender to win a header from a corner kick or getting completely boxed out.
It is a massive functional adaptation, And look, the HIA group, while showing some minor internal improvement compared to their own day one baseline, did not demonstrate a statistically significant improvement over the control group.
Wait, really?
Yeah, the linear running simply did not translate into vertical power.
Wow. So SSG clearly builds more vertical power, but the game isn't played entirely in the air. How did that explosive leg power translate when the athletes actually had to stay on the ground and weave through traffic?
Well, that brings us to the third attribute, which is the change of direction deficit, or COD deficit. The researchers used the 505 test to measure this.
How does that work?
An athlete sprints 15 meters in total, but at the 10-meter mark, they trigger a timing gate. They sprint the final 5 meters, come to an absolute dead stop, pivot 180 degrees, and sprint 5 meters back through the gate.
Got it. But the deficit phrasing is what fascinates me here. It isn't just a raw speed test.
No.
It specifically isolates the penalty time it takes for a human body to brake, turn, and reaccelerate compared to their top straight-line speed.
Exactly. It is a pure measurement of neuromuscular braking efficiency. And once again, the small-sided games produced a significantly smaller deficit than the control group.
Incredible.
The athletes playing the messy mini-games became drastically more efficient at slamming on the brakes and redirecting their momentum.
And the HIIT group?
The HIE trip showed no statistically significant difference compared to the control.
Okay, wait. I'm stuck on this. I understand why a chaotic minigame makes you better at changing direction. I mean, you are constantly dodging people.
Right.
But why on earth had dodging people on a flat surface translate into a significantly higher vertical jump? Those seem like two completely different directions of force.
It does seem that way.
Oh.
But the answer lies deep within the underlying physiology of how muscles absorb and release kinetic energy.
Before we go down to the cellular level, I have a logistical problem with the whole premise.
Oh.
If a 4-on-4 game relies entirely on the flow of play, couldn't a player just effectively hide?
Ugh.
I mean, if I am exhausted on the track during a HI session, I can't hide. The track is the track and the stopwatch is ticking. But in a minigame, couldn't I just lag behind the play, let my teammates chase the ball, and avoid the physical toll entirely?
You've hit on the exact limitation that haunts almost every ecological study. And to their credit, the researchers acknowledge this openly in the paper.
It just seems so hard to control.
It is. Heterogeneity, the variance in individual effort is unavoidable in dynamic games. A central midfielder might naturally find themselves in the crucible of the action far more often than a wide defender. The researchers note this is precisely why longer-term studies are needed to evaluate if these adaptations hold true across an entire competitive season and across different tactical positions.
Because you cannot perfectly control human behavior when you remove the rigid structure of a track.
You cannot. But what's fascinating here is that despite that inherent variance, despite the opportunity for athletes to potentially hide, the SSG group still overwhelmingly dominated the HII group in explosive metrics.
Okay, so they were working hard enough.
Yes. And the key to answering your earlier question about the vertical jump is understanding eccentric muscular engagement.
Okay, let's break that down. What is happening in the leg muscles during a sudden change of direction that isn't happening during a linear sprint?
Think about the different ways a muscle operates. When you are doing linear HII sprints, your muscles are primarily performing concentric actions. The muscle fibers are actively shortening to generate force, propelling your mass forward. But in a small-sided game, the chaotic environment constantly interrupts your momentum. You are sprinting top speed, but suddenly a defender steps into your path. You have to instantaneously arrest your forward momentum.
You have to rapidly decelerate.
Yes, deceleration requires violent eccentric muscle action. Your leg muscles are being forced to lengthen while simultaneously under immense tension, absorbing massive amounts of kinetic energy just to stabilize the knee and ankle joints.
Okay, I think I'm following.
Think of concentric loading, like slamming the gas pedal in a car. Eccentric loading is the extreme, violent wear and tear on your brake pads when you slam them at 60 miles per hour to avoid hitting a brick wall.
Oh, that makes the jump connection completely logical,
Right,
because
yeah.
a counter movement jump doesn't start by just going up. The counter movement is that rapid, aggressive dip downward. The athlete has to eccentrically load the quads and glutes, violently hit the brakes on their own descending body weight, and then instantly reverse that force concentrically into the air.
You are describing the stretch shortening cycle perfectly. Linear HII lacks that severe repetitive braking action.
Right, because you just run straight and then slow down gradually.
Exactly. It doesn't recruit the complex motor units required to manage that extreme deceleration. But there is a secondary mechanism at play here that HIIT fundamentally cannot replicate, and it involves the nervous system.
The brain.
The SSG environment develops spatial awareness and anticipatory decision-making.
I understand that cognitively, playing against human beings makes you smarter. But how does that software upgrade physically manifest in a fitness test? I mean, the 505 test is just running around an orange cone. There are no defenders to outsmart.
Because the brain and the neuromuscular system become a unified, highly myelinated circuit. During a small-sided game, the visual cortex is processing incredibly complex data.
Yes.
The shifting hips of a defender, the trajectory of a bouncing ball. The brain has to constantly calculate physical solutions and fire signals down the spinal cord to the leg muscles in milliseconds.
Wow.
And through repetitive exposure to this chaos, those neural pathways actually become thicker and faster. The athlete learns how to subconsciously position their center of gravity in anticipation of a movement before it even happens.
So the nervous system essentially prunes away the hesitation.
Yeah.
The signal from the brain to the calf muscle to brake and pivot travels faster because it has been tested under chaotic conditions rather than just staring at a static cone on a track.
Exactly. The chaos forces the neuromuscular system to become more robust. The athlete becomes more explosive because they are continually solving dynamic physical puzzles in real time.
And that builds an incredibly resilient physiological hardware that performs better even when isolated in a sterile fitness test.
That is the magic of ecological training.
So what does this all mean? We have spent this time looking at the physiology of female youth soccer players and the biomechanics of decelerating. But there is a much broader lesson hidden in this data regarding how we approach growth, learning, and adaptation in our own lives.
There really is.
I want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. If ecological training, immersing a body in a chaotic, context-rich environment, forces fundamentally better adaptations than sterile precision, how might this apply to the way we train our brains?
It forces us to question our reliance on highly structured learning environments.
Exactly. Are we doing too much intellectual HIIT? I mean, think about how we usually try to master a new subject. We'll read a textbook in a quiet room, we run through flashcards, we memorize isolated facts.
Very linear.
It is highly controlled, it is measurable, and yes, it builds a baseline of knowledge just like sprinting builds an aerobic base. But maybe it doesn't build intellectual agility.
That's a fascinating way to look at it.
Right. Maybe we are starved for intellectual SSG. We need to put ourselves in messy, practical applications in the real world. We need to debate, to improvise, and to react to unpredictable arguments from real people. If we truly want to be able to change direction quickly in our thinking and solve complex problems, maybe we need to spend less time with the metronome and more time in the jam session.
I love that. And from a purely scientific standpoint, this study strongly advocates for the power of that messy integration.
Absolutely.
To truly maximize physical adaptations, particularly in female athletes who have been critically understudied in these dynamic contexts, the data provides a clear directive.
Which is?
While interval training is undeniably effective for building an aerobic foundation, incorporating the unpredictable multi-directional demands of small-sided games is an essential methodology for developing explosive power and agility. You simply cannot fully prepare an organism for a chaotic environment by keeping it in a controlled laboratory.
It is a brilliant piece of research that really shifts the paradigm on how we program human performance. And look, if you are intrigued by the exact testing protocols, or if you want to dig into the specific data tables, exertion metrics, and p-values for yourself, we highly encourage you to read the full article in the Journal of Sports, Science, and Medicine.
Yeah, reviewing the exact work-to-rest ratios the researchers utilized across those 8 weeks offers a fantastic blueprint for anyone interested in sports science.
Absolutely. And as always, if you enjoyed exploring the science behind the sweat today, make sure to follow the channel and turn on your notifications so you don't miss our future deep dives into the cutting edge of scientific research.
There is always a deeper layer of complexity to uncover.
There really is. So the next time you find yourself trying to master a new skill and you're frustrated because the environment is messy, unpredictable, and nothing is going exactly to plan. Wait, strike that. If nothing is going to plan, just remember, your body and your brain are not machines waiting for a perfect engineering input. They are biological organisms. And sometimes it is precisely when we throw away the stopwatch and step into the unpredictable chaos that we experience the most explosive growth. Until